Okay, guys, so let's get started with one of the most simple tweaks, but also one of the biggest color problems that you can have when you're taking photos or when you're editing photos. And of course, we are talking about white balance. Let me know if you saw my screen switch to develop mode. Great. So when you look at this photo, what do you think? What's the problem with this photo? Too blue. Exactly. And so a lot of times we'll have settings on our camera that are either for are like you can have it in auto white balance, but sometimes it's a good idea, especially if you're recording video, to just leave it on one specific setting. So it could be cloudy, it could be sun, but no matter how you got there, you still have to fix the blue issue. And so this is super basic way and but incredibly helpful and fast way to fix white balance. And so when we're talking about white balance, we're talking about the shades, the temperature of the photo. So is the temperature, is it too blue? If it's too blue, it's cold and it's blue like this photo we have right here. If it's too yellow, it's warm. Um, and so I'm pretty sure most of you might know this, but if you don't, the best way, the fastest way to fix a photo that's either too blue or too orange is to open the white balance tab in develop mode and then just with the color picker, select a white area in your image, like this one, and that will take care of a lot of the problem you're having. You can try different white parts of the photo to see what looks slightly better. For example, what happens if I click over here? Even that's even better than this one. This one might be a little too orange. But as you can see, just with one click, we're able to transform a really blue photo that does not look good into a more natural looking photo. Now, you could argue that this photo is now looking a little bit too orange, and then don't fear to just tweak it a little bit to get to a place that you like. So I just reduced the temperature slider only about 10 points, less even, to 28. Let's go 26, 10 points. 26. So we were in 36. And just so that you can see the difference that small numbers do, this is 36 and this is 26. Very slight. But as you can see, I think 26 represents a more natural way that you would have seen this setting in the real world. So now that we've fixed white balance, how else can we enhance this photo in terms of color? Well, let's open our General tab. And what you would naturally do if you're a beginner photo editor is probably to increase saturation, right? So if I increase saturation a little, the colors definitely pop a little more. If I bring it way too much to the right, obviously it starts looking unnatural. But then what's the difference between saturation and vibrance? If anyone knows the difference between saturation and vibrance, let me know in the chat. CB Petrovich says vibrance equals skin tones, which is not entirely true. You're kind of going close to what we're talking about. Norm says I find that vibrance adds blue. If it's adding blue, it's probably more of a setting. It's probably a situation specific to that photo because by definition, or what vibrance should actually do, is increase the colors that are less saturated in your image. So the less prominent colors in your image um, will be that color intensity is going to increase. And at the same time that that happens, vibrance also keeps the skin tones almost unchanged. So vibrance will almost increase everything but the reds, the yellows, and the oranges. So yeah, you guys are right. Affects all colors but skin tones. That's true. Vibrance doesn't add saturation in all colors in the same way as saturation. So two things. It'll add more color to the colors that are less prominent, and it'll also try to bypass skin tones. So if I increase the vibrance of this photo, all of a sudden I can see that, yeah, my blues, my greens are starting to become a lot stronger. So because I find that her skin tone looks all right, I'm just gonna not gonna mess with her skin tone, and I'm just gonna increase a little vibrance. So this is how our photo looked before, where we have a white balance issue and how we started to fix it. So it's good to go back and forth so you can get a sense. Um, I now that I've tweaked my photo a little bit and I increase vibrance, I still find that now my photo is a little too green. So a good way to fix this is to increase the tint slider in white balance. This will bring forward the pinks, the reds. It'll make the skin look even better, and it'll get rid of that sort of annoying green. Green is such a tricky color to work with when you're editing. It usually does not look good. And we're going to actually take a look on how to fix this. So just now I increased the tint slider towards the pinks. So as you can see, the value before is 2. My photo is a little greenish. And if I increase the value, let's go 20, all of a sudden my photo looks not more natural. And so I think we got it to a really good spot. Now, one thing that I like to do, and this is beyond color correction, but I do find that it gives any photo a really polished look. You can decide to do this or not to do this. It's just optional, but it's part of my own workflow that I really like to do. And this is available, of course, in Ultimate. Everything we've looked is available on all versions of ACDSee except Home. Um, so why don't we select the radial gradient? And this is part of what I really like to do to give photos a sort of nice finished look. And what I'm doing is you could call it, it's similar to vignetting, but it's a lot more intentional. It's a lot more flexible. I'm just adding a radial gradient on my subject, leaving my subject unmasked, and everything else it starts to get that red overlay, which means we are selecting it. Now, I'm going to increase feathering by a lot because I want to make a transition from the darker parts of my image to the lighter parts of my image. I want to make them the smoothest as possible. So I won't be, don't be scared to go all the way with feathering. So we're at 98, just below 100. Let's position this a little more, a little better. Right there, maybe we'll narrow it down. And now I'll hide my mask and I'll just decrease the exposure on that selection. This, so check it out. I mean, I'm decreasing exposure very dramatically so that I can have my subject pop a little bit more. So I've decreased the exposure around the edges of my photo with the radial gradient that you can see right there. And now that I've done all my edits, I'm gonna go back to the General tab to um, apply some last either exposure settings or contrast, even saturation and vibrance. So because I brought the light lower, it's a lot darker. I'm gonna bring the exposure back up again. Not too much. just 0.5. And actually, I'm gonna make her skin tones pop a little bit more. So this is the also one of the next steps when we're talking about color correction. The first one, get the white balance right. The second one would be to get your skin tones right. And so if we go down to color EQ, we'll see the color EQ panel. And here you can select to affect the saturation of specific colors, the brightness, the hue, and the contrast. So I'm gonna see what happens if I increase the orange and the red just a little bit. Let's see what happens. Do you see how it's affecting her skin? It's obviously also affecting her lips because they're super red, but that's okay. So I've now added more saturation to the oranges and the reds, making her skin look a little bit more to pop a little bit more. It's not so easy to see, but it's there. So let's take a final look how our image looked before. This is how our image looked before and how it looks now. All right. What do you guys think of ACDSee for Mac? It's pretty good, no? Let's go back to manage mode and ACDSee will apply those changes non-destructively. And now let's take a look at another way of how to um, fix our skin tones. So we have this photo right here, and I'm just going to apply a little crop because I don't really like how the framing of this photo, this is the left side of the field looks a little boring. So I just opened the geometry tab right here, and I'm going to change this photo to a portrait photo. I don't really care about proportions because I'm changing everything now. And I'm just going to crop to make a sort of portrait right there. I'll cut out a little bit more of the space above her head and I'll move it slightly to the left. So this is also, I mean, we're talking about geometry, but everything is important at the end of the day at your workflow. And I would say, obviously, geometry, color, and light are all the things you should be really first be worried about. Everything else is secondary. So let's go back to tune. That looks good. And now let's say I want to make, so her skin is looking a little pale. Let's say I want to add a bit more color there. You can tell, obviously, that the colors of her skin with the background are pretty similar. And so if I was to go to color EQ, let's say, select her skin and bring saturation up, well, it's complicated because her skin has so many red tones, right? And I'm increasing the red in her hair. I'm actually barely affecting the background. I guess I could increase the orange. Let's see what happens. It's not great. So what we need to do, obviously, here is select our subject so that we can only affect the subject. All right, that's an amazing selection of the subject. And what we're going to do, just to make sure that we're getting only her skin, we're going to deselect everything else. To deselect everything else, after you've created your AI selection, that selection will turn into a brush mask. You can see the size of your brush right there. And with your right click, you can start deselecting the parts that you don't want to affect. And I'm not gonna do a perfect deselection because and then also you don't have to, like You have to be precise, but at the same time, you'll realize that it's good to have some bleeding, I would say, in term when you're doing some editing, if that makes any sense. That's more of like a sound expression, bleeding, which is when you're recording a band or you're recording something and um, you have other instruments coming into, let's say, the drum track or whatever. All right, so we applied select subject and then we deselected everything but her face. And here's a really big difference between Mac and Ultimate is that in Ultimate, you have the ability to use color EQ and use color wheel, which we're going to take a look at in just a second. You can use color EQ and color wheel in that particular selection. So that's a big advantage of Ultimate that we don't have here in Mac. However, we can still um, we can still work with her skin tone. So what do you guys think? Just an open question. How would you, if you're not able to have color EQ or the color wheel in the masking panel, in the AI masking panel, how would you work around trying to enhance this person's skin tone? Because it's looking a little green. It's looking a little pale and it's looking a little green. So what do you guys think? And it's related to what we were just looking at. And you can see it right here too. Take away the green. Yes. So the easiest way to do this is tint, obviously. Temperature and tint using white balance. Exactly. You guys got it. So I am going to add tint, pink tint to her skin. And immediately it looks so much better. And after you make that change, you can actually see how green her skin was looking. We can add a bit of warmth to make those tones a bit more orange and even increase saturation very slightly. Maybe we'll take out a little pink. And that looks a lot better. Greenish skin tone, normal skin tone. Okay? Again, if you want to give this photo a finished look, why don't we apply a radial gradient? Radial gradient is my favorite tool, if you can't tell. Let's add a lot of mask. Sorry, a lot of feathering. And let's bring exposure down. Maybe we'll increase exposure slightly in the general tab and bring down the highlights just a little bit. Okay, there we have it. Before and after. Let me know if you guys have any questions before we move to our next image, which tackles one of the things I was talking about before, which is greens in leaves, like greenery. So let's just close all the tabs here. And we'll go back to manage mode. And we'll open this photo right here. Now, this is a tricky one. The skin tones are not too bad. They're not great. The photo is overexposed in a big chunk of it. And the greens are a little too intense. They don't really look good to me. So first thing I would do is again, open color EQ. And to start, I'm going to bring the saturation of those greens down. So when you're taking photos out in the open and you see that your greens are just don't look good, um, reduce their saturation by opening color EQ. Is the easiest way to do this. So I'm going to bring the greens back only to minus 20, just to make everything sort of match. And just notice how more saturated the greens are right off the raw file of this image compared to everything else. And as soon as I bring the greens back to, okay, minus 15, minus 16, now it looks more balanced. And now those greens are not annoying me. Um, they're just part of the photo. Okay, so we fixed those greens. Now, what else can we do? Let's open the General tab and try to, now that we've reduced those greens, let's try to bring back a little saturation in general, see what happens. So that's a little better, and that's good. But I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to color EQ, and just as I reduce the greens, I'm going to increase the reds and oranges, which are where the skin tones are concentrated, because I do need more color in her skin, in her lips. Thanks for joining, Marv. Yeah, this will be available on YouTube. Let's see what happens if I increase the reds, obviously. And I'm just increasing saturation. This is important. You can change brightness too, but we're just covering saturation for now. So I increased the reds a good amount. It's increased the orange a good amount. Not, and it doesn't look so good because it's starting to get her hair too, and the skin starts looking really unnatural. So I'm gonna be a little bit more conservative here. Okay, so it's a little better. Now, to fix the overexposed section here, I'm gonna start, as you can see before we were adding that radial gradient like at the end of our edit, but now I'm actually gonna apply it straight off the bat because I feel like that's gonna help me figure out what I need to do next in the photo. So I'm gonna try to leave it more untouched on the top, but I'm going to try that the mask is covering the overexposed areas that are happening here on the bottom more than on the top, which is why I'm bringing my radial gradient up to the top. Bring the feathering up to a good amount. I'll hide my mask and I'll bring the exposure down. Maybe bring this up again, like that. And that's starting to look a little better. However, my subject is still looking a little pale. So why don't we select our subject, see where that gets us? After you've added masks, AI masks, and this applies for any version of ACDSee, um, you will see that your masks appear here and you won't be able to see the buttons that were available before, but not to worry, you just have to select the plus icon right here to be able to see all of the masks that you can select. So we're going to select our subject. Hopefully it does a good job at separating a subject from the leaves. Actually, that's great because it selected her, no leaves, and it does get her hand. Let's select the other hand by using the brush. So I'm reducing the nib width of the brush so that I'm able to only select her hand. And actually, I'm gonna do something else. Sorry, going back. Let's do select subject. Okay, yeah, same thing as before. We have selected right here. I'm going to I'm going to first edit this selection, and then I'm going to use the AI object selection to select her hand, because selecting this hand is going to be a little tricky manually, and we don't have to do it manually. Super easy to just use the AI object selection. So let's just work with her right now. We'll leave her right hand to the last bit. So what do you guys think? Is she looking a little too yellow? She might be. Let's again bring more red, and there we go. So I'm bringing more tint, pink tint, to just make her skin look a little better now. And maybe I'll reduce a little contrast. I'll bring the clarity down a little. I'm going to soften her face a little. What happens if I bring vibrance? Not really what I'm looking for. Let's see if I'm increase a little saturation. That's not too bad. And now we can see this is before, so we can see she's in clear. We can see before it is yellow, it is green, and now after our edits, we can see that we brought back that red, those reddish tones in her skin. Okay, so let's apply that to the other hand. Select object. Hopefully, ACDSee does a good job at selecting her hand. Let's see, show mask. Great, perfect, amazing. Same thing. Add more tint, a little saturation, bring exposure down a little. Okay, let's go back to the original size of our photo. I'm going to add another radial gradient that I'm going to focus on her face, like that. Increase feathering. Let's take a look at our mask again. That's good. Bring exposure down again. And maybe it is looking a little too dark at the bottom. So maybe I'm going to go back to my first mask and I'm going to make it a little tighter. I'm going to bring it down a little more so that I have more brightness on her. Maybe we'll go back to our general tab here and bring down the highlight recovery. And there we go. Let's take a look at how it looked before. Yeah, so we can see the greens are really too strong. Our focus is her, not the leaves. And after applying all of the color correction we did, we can see her skin looks a lot better. It looks more balanced in terms of the leaves, and it just has a way more natural look than how it did before. I could even bring down the greens even more. Before, after. Okay, what else? Yeah, I wanted to show you, we're gonna take a look at two more things, hopefully. One of them, so I have this really cool photo, and I'm just gonna bring the exposure up because it's a little dark. That's good. I'm gonna apply some cropping. And I'm not gonna constrain proportions. Just want to make it obvious that it's the tree we're looking at. We don't need all that sky. It feels a little unbalanced. So let's see if this does the trick. And maybe now it's a little too tight. Let's bring this open. Let's open it up a little more. Okay, we'll work with this. Now, increasing saturation is one way to make those pinks pop even more. But what I suggest when you have an image that already has really, really cool colors, um, is to now work with the brightness of those colors instead of the intensity of those colors. Instead of working with the saturation of those colors, let's see what we can do with the brightness of those colors. So, sorry, I'm just perfecting here my crop. There we go. I'm gonna go back to color EQ, and instead of messing around with saturation, because if I increase the magenta tones in terms of saturation, it's true it pops more, but it does not look good. However, if I increase the brightness of those pinks just by a little bit, all of a sudden they pop even more than before. It's very subtle, but we're applying more exposure to them. And so that's another really cool way that you can work with color, not by increasing saturation, but by just selectively applying brightness changes to those colors. My greens look a little dull, so what happens if I bring the brightness of my greens up? Nothing changes much. These greens are tough to work with, honestly. But you get the point, you know? So let's take a look at how just that brightness setting worked with our photo. It's adding more pop to those pinks without necessarily make them look unnatural. So that's pretty huge. Now, what about changing colors? Let's open this photo in develop mode. We're gonna do our classic geometry settings right here, just to bring the crop. I think it's always good to see if you can improve the crop, just because it gives you a good, it's good practice, you know? It's good practice. Um, I feel like cropping is such a simple but such an impactful way to affect your photos. So let's just move this a little more to this side. That looks cool. All right, so let me know if you guys use the color wheel when you're editing photos. Let me know if you use it, type 2 if you use it a lot, type 1 if you use it just a handful of times, 0 if you've never used it. Right, cool. So we got a good amount of 2s, but mostly 1s, mostly 1s. Okay, so and a lot of 0s. So this is great. So what's cool about the color wheel is that is way more specific than the color EQ because there's a lot more shading that is happening between the colors here. So when you open the color wheel, you're going to see again an eyedropper, which is going to allow you to select a specific color in your photo. So if I hover my mouse over to the greens, and if you look at the color wheel, what's happening is that there's this little dot that's moving to where the greens are, greens and yellows. And if I bring it back to is it a rose? If I bring it back to the flower, you will see that the reds are being selected. So I'm just gonna click on the reds And if you want to see what you're actually selecting after you've clicked on the color you want, just head to this button here. Press and hold to preview the selection mask. And you'll see that we have our flower selected almost fully. We have some red selected in the back. That's okay. And now, after you've selected your colors, you will see all of these sliders that you can work with. So I can increase the saturation of those reds to make it look really crazy. Not great, but it's all about subtlety. So just a little saturation, maybe a little brightness. Small change. But what we want to actually take a look at here is how can we can change. Let's try to make this pink, not red, a pink rose. So after you've selected your color, all you have to do is move the hue slider. So if I move my hue over to the left, my flower starts becoming purple. Blue if I move it fully to the left. And as soon as I start moving it to the right, we're going to start passing up to the yellows, the oranges, the greens. There we go. So pink right there. Now let's bring the saturation back a little to make it look more natural. And that's it. Now we have these colors selected here on the top too. That's all right. I mean, they're barely changing, but you can always work with your color wheel and you can always try to narrow down the color you're trying to work with. So if I start moving this, my center point of the color wheel to the right, it'll start deselecting the less saturated tones of that specific color. So now that I moved it, the center of my color wheel, I moved it way over to the right. I'm only selecting those really strong reds, right? And what I actually need to do is get rid of the darker parts of the red. So maybe if I bring this down up here, maybe that looks a little better. But you just got to play around with it. And again, if you guys are using Ultimate, you have your color wheels included in your AA masking. So if I select, oh, and I guess let's take a look at another way to do this. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's select our subject. Let's see if it selects the rose. It did. I'm just going to get rid of this part here with my right click. Whoops. There. Now I won't have the problem of affecting the colors in the background because I'm only going to be working with my selection. And in Ultimate, after you've done your selection, you can apply color EQ and color wheel only to that selection. So that's even better. But we can also do this, change this flower to be pink by changing the hue of this selection. So if I just go here to tint, that's not going to look great. But if I go to color strength, let's bring it to the middle and now bring the hue to the pinks, you will see that our photo is now pink or purple. Sorry, our rose. So before red and after pink. All right. Misty says, I agree about cropping, and it took me a while to learn to do the cropping first, so colors I am cropping away are not influencing my other edits. I don't think I understand so well what you mean, but I'm glad that you're applying cropping first because like it really helps you um, tell a better story. let's open a photo that is a little overexposed with, and then it has slightly, it's a little tricky photo. So you can see our colors are not too strong, um, but there's a lot that, and we're gonna go back to cropping on this one. How can we make this photo look better in terms of color, but also geometry? Let's open the geometry tab. And we are going to constrain our proportions to keep it exactly how it looks. And I think that the best part of this photo is happening here where you can see the sort of the valley start to happen. And also where you can see the church right here. So let's just bring it in. Let's just do a big crop to try to maybe there. There's a little tilting that's going on in this photo, so I can rotate and strength, and it's slight. So when you're doing slight changes to rotation, my suggestion is to go with the plus and minus buttons, because if you just start moving the slider, you might do too big of changes. So maybe 1.5 is good, 1.6. And let's see if this looks better than before. Definitely looks better to me. I'm gonna bring it down a little here, have more ocean in, or I don't know if it's the ocean, but more water. I'm just gonna bring it in a little more, and maybe even a little more. Okay, that's a lot better. Now we can tackle the colors in this photo by increasing vibrance and saturation, obviously. And I think this photo does need a little bit saturation, but what it needs maybe first is contrast. So contrast, you would think it's like a light and dark. Um, you're affecting the light in your photo, but you're also actually changing the colors quite a lot when you're applying contrast changes. So it'll make the darker colors darker, and it'll like that, and it'll make the lighter colors brighter at the same time. So a good amount of contrast to bring this photo up to a more colorful look. So I haven't changed any saturation or any vibrance. I'm just working with contrast right now. And as you can see, I'm going back and forth in my crop because as I keep working on this photo, I keep noticing that maybe I can bring more ocean in, but maybe not. Maybe it was good how we had it. All right, so we've cropped, we've added contrast to bring more color to our photo. And because we did a pretty big crop on this one, I'm going to go to Detail tab and I'm going to add a little bit of sharpening. All right. So I'm just focusing on the church here, and I'm going to bring my sharpen slider to the right, pretty dramatically at first to see what happens. And our photo now looks a lot more crisp, which is great. Next, to try to center the attention of my image on the valley in front of, on the town in front of the water. Yeah, that's a really good point. We can apply a little dehaze, which is similar to kind of like working with contrast. So that's good. Just a little there. And I'm going to do the same thing we did before, which is like I've increased contrast and I'll increase a little vibrance, but I'm going to bring my greens down a little bit. The greens are always getting in the way. So if I bring my greens down, Oh, I'm changing the brightness. So let's go back to saturation in color EQ and bring the greens back. I'm gonna bring them back like that, have it a bit more balanced. And now I'm gonna go back to my general tab and increase saturation. There. So this before and after. And finally, to bring our center focus here, we're gonna apply our radial gradient. We'll apply more feathering again and reduce the exposure of our photo on the corners pretty dramatically, like so. This change made it possible for us to be able to see this guy, actually. And there we go. Now, I might increase the exposure of the overall image a little bit more in my general tab and maybe bring my contrast down and the greens a little bit back too. So that's not too bad. Let's take a look at how it looked before. So this is our photo before. It's a pretty dull photo in terms of color. And now we've enhanced it by working with contrast, saturation, light, um, and masking. Let's take a look at some questions before we wrap up. Okay, great, Misty. Thanks for joining. Ray says, would you mask the hill behind the valley and apply dehaze just to that? So I'm not quite sure. I think that you would probably be able to do that. Um, I don't think it really needs dehaze here in the back anymore because it's good that it's looking a little faded in comparison to what's more in the front of our photo. Um, but I'm pretty sure that Ultimate does have a dehaze setting here in the masking. So you're totally able to mask just the hill behind by using the radial gradient and working with the dehaze slider.